Tonight's talk with your host Reggie B. Come on, let's all join in. Free your voice, it's your choice, alright here. Oh, simply straight talk.
Oh, that was a good run. Now I could really go for a light snack right now. Oh.
Yes, it was. I know just the spot. They make great salads and healthy drinks.
Perfect. You know what, yeah? What song were you listening to on the last leg of the run? Because, girl, you were singing, jogging, and dancing.
Oh, that was Tone G music. Lately, I've been wearing out his remix to the song Right Now.
Okay, I need to check that out. You know, have you ever wanted to be a singer? You know, or part of the music business?
I don't know. Having a platform like that would definitely allow me to help people. The fame and money does sound good, to be honest.
If I could sing, I would definitely give it a try. But you know what, yeah? I've heard so many horror stories about artists who end up owning record labels so much money. Not to mention, there's always some type of madness about the music, who owns it, what type of songs you can sing. And you know me, no one is going to control me. Especially if it's about my career and name.
Oh, trust me, I know that's right. When it comes to my money and my time, don't play with me. Honestly, I do not understand how people sign contracts and still get screwed over. There is so much information available for free these days.
You're absolutely right, but girl, I can see how a deal would sound real good if you're struggling day to day to make the ends meet. You know what I mean?
Honey, let me tell you, if anything in life can make you do something for extra change, it's bills. Let me tell you, there were moments I was about to make that move in the club or rob a bank.
You're so crazy. But speaking of crazy, and we are talking about music, why hasn't our best friend offered us any opportunities? Not once has he approached us and said, "Hey, Angelique and Melissa, would you like to be part of a video or be extras on the set?" I mean, come on.
You know what? I never thought about that. We always supporting Reggie's work, and the only thing we get in return is a headache. Ooh, it's on now. Come to think of it, why are we not invited to any release parties or to be a part in his podcast show?
Exactly. Oh, he owes us. Do you remember at the wedding when he took the whole time Nayeli was singing? Girl, I wanted to straight up punch him in the mouth.
Oh, I remember. He was so annoying, and don't forget all the times we had to tell him to shut up singing. He sounds like a cat trying to talk. One of these days, I'm gonna buy a water gun and fill it up with hot sauce, and the minute he starts singing, pow pow, squirt squirt, right in his mouth. I bet you he won't be so quick to start singing again.
Now that's a good idea. As a matter of fact, why don't we call him and set up a little meeting about this, huh?
You know what? I'll call Mr. Music Man right now. Hey, Simply Straight Talk family. Welcome to the Simply Straight Talk Show, where every topic is a hot topic, and hot topics are all about that real talk. Now here's your host, Reggie.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Simply Straight Talk Show. This is your host, Reggie Maddox. Man, listen, today I want to talk to you about record label and artist disputes. Now, let me tell you something. I love writing music. I enjoy writing music. I love being the behind the scenes guy, writing those songs and giving them, well, not giving them, but and sharing them. But what I really want to talk about today is the disputes between the record label and the artist and how all of this comes into play. Now, I want to say this now, because I'm going to mention some things today, but I understand that record labels are not always going to tell you the truth. Okay. I want you to understand that, but I want to kick some responsibility back on the artists, especially the young artists. This is not like the 70s and the 80s to where you didn't really have much technology available to where you could look stuff up and research things. It took a little more effort. But now You have all of this information right in your hands. It's right there. So I really don't understand how a lot of these people get into these contract situations and totally get screwed over because there's just too much information readily available. Do your research, people. Do your research. But I don't want to hammer you because I do understand too that, if you're the type of person that came up where you didn't have a lot and somebody comes up to you and say, hey, I heard you rapping. I heard you singing. And you know what? I want to sign you to a record deal. I'm going to give you $100,000 advance to help you make the record. We're going to promote this thing. We're going to give you a new life, a new opportunity. I get it. I get how somebody can be like, okay, I'm going to do this. This is an opportunity. This is my chance. I'm passionate about this. Let's do it. Give me the contract. And I think that's where people need to pause and put on the brakes. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with record label and artist disputes, let me just give you a quick history recap, okay? Because, first off, tell me this. How do you feel when you hear about artist disputes with record labels? Do you feel like it's the record label's fault? Do you feel like it's the artist's fault? Or do you feel like they're both to blame? How do you feel about it personally? But kind of linger on that for a second. But as you know, recently, Megan Thee Stallion encountered a dispute after asking her record label to renegotiate some things. And allegedly, it was said that the record label was like, no, we're not going to renegotiate. We're not even going to talk about what you want to negotiate about. And we're not going to release your music. That's it. Conversation done. Okay. Allegedly, that's what took place. But she's not the first, because let me give you some real celebrity names that I want you to understand that, how often artists are taking record labels to court. Okay. Because in spite of a 26-year-long business relationship with Columbia Records, they said goodbye to Johnny Cash in 1986 because they decided that the country legend now was not bringing in enough money for the label, so they dropped him. Okay. One of the most notable record disputes was Prince with Warner Brothers. And Prince was very open about his dispute with Warner Brothers. Because after he signed a $100 million contract with them in 1992, he wanted to be able to release more music when he wanted. And he also wanted to own the original master tapes of his albums. Now, we're going to get into that a little bit, but master is the original first recorded song. Once you record it, that's the original. That's the master. So that's what we mean when we say master. It's the original. Okay. Then we have Dr. Dre. He was able to win his legal battle against Death Row Records in 2015 because a judge ruled that the label did not have the rights to sell his album. It was the Chronic. That's right. It was the Chronic. They didn't have the right to sell that album digitally. And the judge also ruled that Dr. Dre was owed far more money from online sales of the 1992 album and entitled him to receive 100% of the proceeds of online sales. See, these are the things, man, I'm telling you, and we're going to get into all this. Now, another one, Latavia Robinson and LaToya Luckett claimed they didn't know they were dropped from Destiny's Child until they saw the music video for Say My Name with 2 new members, Farrah Franklin, who later left, and Michelle Williams, who was allegedly lip syncing their parts. Now, here's a big one. Here's a little backstory about Diana Ross. Now, Diana Ross. Now, Diana Ross had the hit single, I'm Coming Out. Now, the song was written by Nile Rodgers. Now, after they finished the record, the label said they hated it. And they did not want to release it. They said it did not sound like a Diana Ross record. Ultimately, they had to take the record label to court to get them to release the recorded song. And it turned out to be Diana Ross's biggest selling hit of her career. Okay? So these are the things that you need to be mindful of. And these are the things that we're going to talk about, because when it comes to dealing with record labels, you really have to be conscious about when you sit down at that table and you sign that contract. Now, some of the more common things that you're going to find in a record label contract is how many albums will you be obligated to make? Are they signing you for 1 album, 2 albums, or 7 albums? Now, normally it's between 2 and 7. Now, it doesn't mean they're going to release 7 albums. It doesn't mean that you're guaranteed for 7 albums. They're just saying that, we'll sign you to do 7 albums, but it's not guaranteed. And that's because if that first album flops, they can drop you and say, it didn't work out. Have a nice life. Because they don't want to put any more money into you. Next, the royalty rate, which can be between 11 to 15 or 18% of the retail rate, but it will vary based on the negotiations and the record label. Creative control. Creative control. When we talked about some of the other artists previously that I just mentioned about their record label disputes, you heard about Diana Ross. That was supposed to be the single release to introduce that album, I'm Coming Out. The record label didn't want to release it. So you need creative control to determine which single and when you want to release that single, the release date, the album cover, the artwork, what producer you want to work with. And like I said, you can still be dropped even if you have a contract saying that, they're going to sign you to do 7 albums. But if that first album fails, it's not, keep in mind, it is not guaranteed. Now, there are some things that a record deal should have, in my opinion. These are some things that you need to consider. An agreed sum of money to market and promote the terms, and the repayment if required. And we're going to jump right into that next. And also, agree on a release date and a selected single to release. Now, when I say a sum of money, that brings me into the next point, because a lot of artists don't understand that when a record label says, we're going to give you an advance to make this album, what they're saying is like, okay, we're going to give you $100,000. All right. Now, that $100,000 is for you to make the album. Now, they don't really monitor the money. They give it to you. So it's up to you to manage it. And oftentimes you'll find people who will get that $100,000 and they think that that's a payment. No, it is a loan. When the record company gives you an advance, it's not like, it's kind of like your job. It's like, we're going to give you this advance because you say you need a paycheck early. We're going to give it to you, but you got to pay this back. And some people either have false expectations of how they're going to pay it back or when it's paid back. They think their first record is going to do 80 million copies and going to make $30 million. And it doesn't happen. So now you stuck with this advance. So let's just say this. Say you sign a deal with the record label and they say that we're going to give you 15%, okay, of record sales. That means they get 85%. Now, to make the album, they're going to give you $100,000. Now, you got the $100,000 and you say, you know what? I think I'm going to go spend $5,000 on some clothes. Okay. So you might get $5,000 worth of clothes because you feel like now you need to start looking the part. You need to start being a superstar. You may go and spend another, let's say, $50,000 on a car. Okay. So you might buy you a car to get around because you're trying to have that image, that music world image. So now out of that $100,000, you're already down to $45,000. Now, keep in mind, the record company says, we're going to set you up with studio time. Well, that studio time, let's say they book you for like 2 weeks. Most studios about $1,500. So let's say your studio time runs you about $20,000 for 2 weeks. Now you had a situation to where that also comes out of that $100,000. So now you're down to $25,000. And also they provide a producer. Okay. Producer want his advance, which is let's say we say $10,000 advance for the producer. Okay. So now you're down to $15,000. Now you've done the album. The record company says, okay, we need to start promotion. So we're going to do $75,000 worth of promotions. Okay. So now you're even more in the hole. Okay. Because that comes out too. So now you owe $160,000. All right. So let's say the album releases, the album makes, let's go $500,000. All right. So you get $500,000 from album sales. So keep in mind, you only get 15%. So that's going to put you at $75,000. And the record label is going to get $425,000, which does not go towards that $160,000 that you owe. Okay. Now, out of that 425, let's see, you're going to have $85,000 that you still owe. You still owe money. You got to understand, when they give you an advance, it is a loan. And a lot of artists make the mistake of thinking that, okay, I got this $100,000. So you want to get you a little entourage. You know, you want to get personal cars to drive you around. You want to start having security that you don't need yet. You know, you want to show off to your people, make them feel, and all the hotel expenses. When you start staying in the fancy hotels, when you start having personal drivers, all these extra expenses that you bring in because you got that 100,000, that's coming out of your pocket. That means you got to pay the record label back that. So all of your friends that's hanging around with you because they kind of enjoying the moment and kind of living La Vida Loca on that $100,000 loan that you now have to pay back. So on your first album, you may not make anything. Think about New Edition. New Edition was a perfect example of a group that they said for years they made absolutely no money on their record sales. That's why it's really important that when you sit down to discuss a record deal with a record label, that you really understand the contract, that you really understand the purpose of that advance. You really understand that when you start bringing other people in, you start getting these entourages and you start doing all this fancy stuff, it's not free. You're not being credited this stuff. You are working on a loan that you're going to have to pay back. But now that we got all that out there, now that we kind of gave you an idea about the advance, how artists can get caught up in not using the advance correctly. We gave you an idea about artists from the past who have actually had to go to court about their music and their work. You know, we're going to take a little break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about why you need to make sure that you maintain the rights to your music. Why we're going to talk about why you need to understand the music industry behind the scenes, not just what you do on stage. You need to understand the whole thing. We're going to try to discuss some of that. I want you guys to really kind of get an idea of what you're getting into, because I'm not saying that you shouldn't trust a record label, but I'm saying that you should be conscious and you should be intelligent enough to understand that when you read that paper or hire someone you trust as a lawyer to read that contract, that you understand what's your royalty rate. Where are you getting your money from? This advance you just got, you know, how much got to be paid back? What's the time frame that it's got to be paid back? What's the percentage? Because numbers look real good when people sit down in front of you and tell you, oh, we're going to give you $100,000 for this, and then we're going to help pay for this. We're going to promote this. But they're telling you a lot of things they're going to do, And they're telling you that, if this album sells good, we get out a good album, you're going to make quite a bit of money, And it comes to find out you're in debt. So we're going to talk about that, man. We're going to try to work some of this stuff out, give everybody an understanding in the second part of the show. First part here, I just wanted you guys to have an idea and an understanding of how people get caught out there. And that it's not just you, but we've had some big name stars still getting caught in bad contracts. And we're also going to talk a little bit about the record label versus going the independent route. All right, so stay tuned. We'll be right back.
This is Simply Straight Talk with your host, Reggie, bringing the conversation straight to you.
Hey, this your man Reggie here. Are you looking for some fresh new music? Are you looking for an artist that's got that positive vibe and that positive flow, that knows how to flow lyrically? Then man, you need to check out Tone G Music with songs like Buzzing, Good Deeds, and Pick Up the Phone. Now these songs are available on Apple Music and other digital platforms. Tone G brings that positive vibe in everything he does. And the music he brings with the reggae style and that smooth lyrical flow, oh, you know what to do. Y'all check out Tone G Music.
We hope you're enjoying the show. As our listeners, this show is made possible because of your support. Make sure you click the subscribe button and leave a comment. Thank you for being a part of the show, and now back to your host, Reggie Maddox.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Simply Straight Talk Show. This is your host, Reggie Maddox. Man, today we're talking about record labels and artist disputes. I wanted to share some insight and hopefully just to kind of wake you up if you're looking to get into the music business on some things you need to consider before you put your John Hancock on that contract. Before you sign everything away because the numbers look good and everything seems right, we really want to talk about some things that you need to be negotiating before you even start, okay? And understand what's guaranteed and what's just conditional. You know what I'm saying? But first, we talked about masters. And when we talk about master, that means the original song. That's what you first recorded it on. But I want to get into more of why it's important to own your masters. But also I want to talk about the 6 parts of a copyright. And I just want to briefly go over these real quick with you so you have an idea of why it's important to own your work. First part is the reproduction part. Now, this covers when you or someone else makes copies of your song. You can make them or you can license others to make them. This is a core right that you get when you create a song. Okay, now that's the first part of copyright, which is the reproduction. Second is the distribution. This is your right to distribute all your songs to the public. With this right, you can send digital files of your music to digital stores all across the country, or you can physically deliver copies to your fans at live shows and in stores. The reproduction and distribution rights have been the bread and butter of the recording industry for years. I mean, from the beginning, that's what it's been all about, reproduction. Now, labels pay you every time they make a copy of your song, supposed to. Okay? Next, we want to talk about derivative rights. Now, this helps you to create new work based on your song. This could be a new arrangement or even a theatrical performance that combines your music with dance. And of course, you can create your own derivative works. But the real money here is from licensing to others. Other musicians can pay or get permission to sample your music or create their own arrangements or variations or other creative use. Okay? That's why it's important to own your stuff. Okay? Public performances. This is a good one too, because anytime someone public performs your song, and they're doing it from a mass crowd and they've been paid, and they're paid singing your hit songs, I think you want a little change off of that. Now, this protects you when your song is performed to the public. Anytime your song is played in public, be it over the radio or live or online, it is a public performance. Again, you'll make the most money by licensing your right to others. Radio stations and venues pay you. Okay? Now, Public performances via digital transmission, sound recording. This allows you to perform the sound recording to the public. Sound recording owners get paid when their recordings are streamed and played. And that's stuff like iTunes, Spotify, Pandora, YouTube. It's not much. Okay. So trust me, I know it is not much. Okay. And, the other thing is display. Now, this is not really relevant for music, but it's more so for art forms, like visually sound. However, you could use this right when you're talking about like your lyrics and stuff, but most people don't really get into that, or stuff on t-shirts. They don't really do that. But those are the 6 parts of copyrights. Now, here's the thing that you got to understand. And this is what I really want to drive home. If you are meeting with a record label, you need to understand your royalties. And you want to make sure that you're not one of those artists who's forced to still be touring when they're 80 or 90 years old because they're not getting anything from the work they created. One of the most intelligent things that inspired me in my life when I heard Michael Bivins talk about iTunes. He says every 3 months he gets that check from iTunes. Was it iTunes? I think it was iTunes or Apple, for the new edition songs, the songs that's being played, the songs from BB&D. That's how you want your career to be set up. You want it to be set up to where if you decide that you're going to take a year off from making albums, that you still have those residuals coming in, that your bank account or your mailbox is still getting money from your work. If you are not careful and you sign over your rights to your masters, to your work, to the record label, you may only be getting residuals maybe for a year. You may only get a signing. Like, put it like this. Prince had a perfect analogy when they were discussing when I think Mariah Carey got, it was either $30 million or $50 million to do an album. Okay. So they gave her $30 million or $50 million. And Prince had a great point. What if she sold 1 million copies? What if you sold 2 million copies? Okay. So you have to really think about it. Don't be so stuck on one big number, because record labels do their homework. They know that if they can hit you with just one huge signing bonus, listen, we'll give you $10 million to make this album. But yet if the album sells 3 or 4 million copies, you got screwed. You really got screwed, because that album could be selling for a while. What if that album turns out to be a platinum album or a solid gold album, or one of those albums that we call a classic that just never dies, like Michael Jackson's Billie Jean album? The thing about it is, if Michael Jackson would have said, well, just give me $10 million, you know how much money he would have lost? While the record company would be constantly making money every time someone downloads or plays or buys that music? You have to be mindful of that. You got to sit back and do your math. Just because they say they're going to drop 10 million or 5 million in front of you, it doesn't mean that you should not lose out on the back end. Because if you're not getting any residuals, if you're not getting any royalties, and you're just taking that one lump sum, you might be screwing yourself. Now, if you make an album, they give you $10 million and the album only sells 5,000 copies, hey, you won out. But normally they're not going to take a loss like that. But you have to be mindful of stuff like that. Don't just take the big sum and think this is it, because if you do, you might lose out. So you got to think about stuff like that. So you want to make sure that you own the rights to your music, because you want to set yourself up to where you are doing what needs to be done to protect you, to where you still have that check coming in. You know, if you're an artist and you're going on tour. So what happens if you have a nice album, it's doing good, and you decide to go on tour? Well, there's a lot of money that has to go out, but there's a whole lot of money coming in. The one thing you want to do is make sure that some of that money is coming to you, what you deserve. Think about it. In some venues, if the artist sells out the venue, like say, if they say, listen, we're going to book you in Madison Square Garden. The management, the record label, the booking person, you know, they may say, listen, if you got, like Madison Square Garden may say, if you sell this out, They may work it in the contract to where if the venue is sold out, we're going to give you a $5,000 bonus. Well, how much of that are you getting? You're the one they're coming to see. Shouldn't you be getting that bonus if you sell it out? All the time, the artists don't even pay attention to the contracts that's negotiated with these venues that they're performing at. The merchandise that's being sold, the T-shirts, the records, all that stuff being sold in the lobby. Are you getting a percentage of that? Is your management getting a percentage of that? Is the record label getting a percentage of that? Do you own the name? Do you own your name? You know, and that was a big issue. Remember when Prince had his battle with Warner Brothers, he changed his name to a symbol. And then he wrote slave on his cheek. You have to be careful. These disputes can go on forever, and they're costly. They are expensive. Now, another thing we want to talk about is what happens in the event that, say, an event gets canceled, or the people that you're supposed to be, the artists you're collaborating with doesn't show up and you was booked as one event. Johnny Gill is the perfect example of when New Edition was going on tour. This was a couple years ago. New Edition was going on tour, right? But the event was being booked as New Edition as a whole, the six, not BB&D, not Johnny Gill, not Ref Transvent, not Bobby Brown, but the events were being booked as everybody had to be there. All six members of New Edition. It wasn't just, you couldn't go on with a half show. And a lot of these venues started to sue New Edition. Johnny Gill, who, based on his interview, said that he was there at every show. He was the only one there all the time. Johnny Gill spent a lot of money, tons of money, on legal fees trying to fight this. So if you're going to be touring and you're going to be with somebody, you're going to be performing, you need to know the contract. Don't just say, hey, guess what? JB, you're going to be performing here, man. We got you a show, man. You're going to be performing at Madison Square Garden. You're going to be performing at the Mercedes-Benz Arena in Atlanta. You know what I'm saying? You're going to be performing at Prairie View. You're going to be performing at Southern, JSU. You know what I'm saying? If they tell you you're performing somewhere, you should want to see that contract. You should want to understand how that contract is set up. Because let's just say it's you performing and you got Little John and you got Jay-Z and, Tim McGraw and George Strait. They're all going to be there with you. It's supposed to be one collaborative group. Is that contract for that venue based on you guys as a collaboration as one? Or is it each individual having their own contract? Even if you're a group, how are you setting up your contracts? What do you do if one person doesn't show? What if it's one of the lead singers? What if the venue says, the host venue says, listen, we book for the entire group. We did not book for these two people not to be here. If you want to swap out a drummer, that's fine. But no. So you owe us. So you got to be careful about that. You got to pay attention and understand. Because if you don't understand what's going on, you're going to end up getting screwed. You're really going to end up getting screwed. So, and that brings us to the thing to where if you are a singer, okay, or a band, you need agreements. You heard about Destiny's Child. When I told you earlier in the show how Destiny's Child, two of the girls said that they didn't even know they was out of the group until they saw a video with and allegedly two other new members singing. You need to understand that once you enter the music industry, you are a business. Now, some people are fine with saying, listen, all I want to do is sing and perform. Record label, whatever you do, I'm with you. Other folks are like, well, wait a minute now. I appreciate having the support of the record label, but I want some control over my music. What songs I write, how many albums I release, when I release them, what singles I'm going to release, what type of music I'm going to do, where I'm going to perform, how my album cover is going to look, how my image is going to be portrayed to the public. And you have to ask yourself, if you're a band, are you going to trademark your name? If you're a singer, are you going to trademark your name? You know, who's going to own the name? Especially if you're a band, that's even a little more tricky. Are you going to own it as a whole? Or is one person who maybe the one that started the group going to own it? Who's going to own the name? And what if you lead the label? Now, as a band, if you decide things like, you know, if two of the band members wrote the songs, are you going to split the songwriter income? And what if two of the band members decide to leave? Who's going to use the name? Or someone gets kicked out. That was a big thing with New Edition as well. Who can perform the music? That was a big thing with the Temptations when they broke up. You had David Ruffin and Eddie Kendricks with a group with some new guys going around performing as the Temptations. And then you had the original members, other original members of the Temptations performing as the Temptations too. So you had two sets of Temptations. You need to have all of this stuff worked out in a contract, because I understand that sometimes somebody may be your friend. Y'all might have grew up together. Y'all might be homeboys. But listen, when y'all get in front of these record labels, you might have a good record label that says, listen, we're going to try to bring everybody up together and work together on this. Whereas some record labels, you might have an A&R person that says, you know what? He's good, but she's the voice. We can give her a solo deal and make a lot of money. And that person may be like, you know what? I'm sort of tired of the group thing, so maybe I can go off and make my own and do it by myself. You're going to have people like that. Some people look at it like, I can have the whole stage and show to myself. Why do I need to share it with you? I'm the voice. You're going to have that. So you have to have all of these things worked out. You got to think about all of these things when you walk into a record label. Because if you depended on the record label to draw up these contracts of how all this stuff is going to work, they're going to do it so everything is in their favor. They're going to own the masters. They're going to have full control. You're going to get your little royalty, or you're going to get your little advance, and they're going to have you singing and dancing like a chicken on stage. You got to make sure that you do your research. Research that record label. Do they have a lot of issues? Do they have a lot of artists filing disputes against them? Look up the musical terms. Understand the contracts of how it works. But understand this too. If you're going to be in the music industry, you have to work. It is not about smoking, drinking, and partying. That's what a lot of image of the music industry is today. Everybody sees the after effect of the celebration and the having fun. Nobody really sees the real work of what goes on behind the scenes in the studio, rewriting the songs, trying to find the beats. And here's another thing that I think I was talking to somebody and they was asking me about writing songs. I had to explain to them, they thought that if they wrote the song and a producer comes in, makes some changes to the song, that the full ownership of the song still belongs to him. And I had to explain to them, no, it doesn't. Because once you write the song, okay, and the producer implements maybe some different beats, a different tempo, once he adds his touch into it, now it's a co-ownership. Even if you just write the lyrics to the song, say you write the lyrics, okay, and you have somebody else come in and provide the music track for the background to the lyrics, you're now co-owners. You don't own the song anymore unless you buy the rights to the song from that person. So those are the things that you really have to think about. Those are the things that you got to pay attention to. You know, every time you make a song in the music industry and somebody else's hands get into the creation of that song, you are now diluting your rights to that song because they have a portion of rights to that song because it is now not a single writer. Okay. So you got to remember that. That's why I want everybody to be really smart when you get into these contracts, when you start sitting down with these record labels. Now, some people say, well, maybe I should just go independent. And I don't understand the difference. Here's the difference between independent artists and artists who are with a record label. With a record label, it's obvious. You're going to have, well, with a major record label, you're going to have more money behind you, okay? Because, you know, they can basically push a button and say, get this song out there. And radio stations are going to play it nonstop. because they just have that influence in the music industry. Okay. Now with an independent artist, you may have to work a little harder as far as getting your music played on radio stations because you don't have that influence and impact that a major label does. So, because with major labels, it's like, oh, so you have some good. I'm trying to think of some big artists. Let's say you got Ludacris, you got Drake, you got Tim McGraw, you got George Strait, you got these legends that record companies are like, listen, hey, we'll drop it. Can you have them come by the station when they're in town? It's little things like that. So major labels, like I said, they just got that button, that one button push, and your record is boom, blasting everywhere. Whereas independent labels do have that. Independent artists, can do that, but they just don't have the real push and force behind it. But here's something you need to keep in mind. Independent labels are going to be more personable with you. They're going to be more hands-on with your project, whereas record labels are going to be assigning people who they feel you need to work with. It's not really about you. It's more about getting that music out, who's available, and how they want you to sound. Whereas the independent label may be more like, what do you like? Let's find your sound. Let's find your niche. What makes you unique and stand out? So that's sort of the difference I think you'll get between the major record labels and the independent label. Now, I want to say this as well. People got to understand that, when you're trying to make that transition and you're trying to get into the music industry, you have to understand imaging and branding. And I see this so often that a lot of artists today, well, here's what it is. Here's what I'm just going to say it because it's like this. When we look at Prince, we looked at Michael Jackson, Patti LaBelle, Luther Vandross. And I know people hate when you bring up the older artists. But the thing about it is, when those artists came in, they were worked with. They were actually sort of worked with. The industry took time to kind of understand them. When Roger Now talked about Diana Ross, it was a big process. They interviewed Diana Ross. They actually sat down and learned about her life. They wanted to hear her life story. They wanted to understand Diana Ross. So that's how the album Diana came about. That whole album was a reflection of Diana Ross's life. And they believed in really building and crafting artists so they could be real, true artists. Whereas music record labels today are not about building. They're not about educating. They're not about, kind of developing artists. That's what I'm looking for. They're not about developing artists. Is who can give me that hit the quickest and bring in the most profit. That's it. That's how they see it. Who can bring in the most profit? They want that quick one-hit profit. If you can drop another one, boom, come on. As long as you're bringing in those profits, they love you. And that's what they care about. So it's not really about developing and creating artists these days. It's not about really educating the artist and working with the artist. It's more about, give me that hit, let's make this profit. And you can tell by the music that's now being generated today. You can tell. Music today is based on, can you make a quick hit? Because think about music. I'm going to go off a little one real quick. Bear with me here. When you think about music that was written back in the day, think about, you could hear Run DMC and you knew that was Run DMC. When you heard a Prince song, you knew it was Prince. You know what I'm saying? When you heard John Shelton, you knew it was John Shelton. You knew Alabama. You knew the Oak Ridge Boys. You knew Tina Turner. You knew Whitney Houston. You knew Luther Vandross, Denise Williams. I mean, it can just go on and on and on. Full Force. Artists were unique. They were unique in their style. They were unique in their voices. And it came out, which made the music so much better. Whereas now, it's a replication of what's the hottest trend. And I think that's the difference. That's what we're kind of losing. I know that was a little bit off. But back to what I was saying. You got to be careful about your branding, because think about this. A lot of people don't realize this. And I want to say this because I know a lot of people are trying to get into the music industry, and there are people on my social media, and I look at their social media sites. If I'm looking at their social media sites, it doesn't represent music. It represents, I see people who showing that they're smoking weed, people showing that they're getting drunk, people showing that they're at parties, they're talking crazy, but nothing tells me that you have a real passion and love for your music. I don't care how many videos you try to sit there and make. I don't care how often you try to do TikTok videos and singing. If you are not crafting your social media to highlight your vocal and your musical skills, it's bad branding. It is bad branding. You can twerk, you can curse, you can act silly and stupid, do whatever you want to do. But if you're not showing the listeners or the industry that your branding is about passionate for music, then you're gonna end up screwing yourself. Because every contract for every corporation, even when I work with different people, I have a moral clause that I use within my contract that you have to maintain a certain behavior standard. Because if you look bad on what you're doing in social media, guess what? If people know that I'm tied to you, that means I'm going to be a part of that as well. So think about that. Listen, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back in a few minutes.
We'll be back with your host, Reggie, on Simply Straight Talk.
Hey, are you looking for some great music, upbeat and with a positive voice? Well, the song I Stand With You is exactly what you need. This timeless song has a pop version sung by Audrey Carmel. And a reggae version sung by General Steele, now known as Revelation.
Now I know some days you may feel blue, Lord. Trust in your greatness to see you through.
These songs are now available on iTunes and other digital platforms for download. Don't miss out. Get your copy today.
Give life your best, and I know.
You're listening to the Simply Straight Talk Show, bringing you the best conversation on your morning, afternoon, and primetime drive.
Hey everybody, and welcome back to the final thoughts of today's show. Man, today we talked about record label artists and their disputes. And in the earlier part of the show, I kind of gave you some information, some history on some artists who've had disputes with record labels. I told you about the 6 parts of the copyright, for your music. And I just want to say that I know it seems like I'm kind of hard on record labels. And it's just because there are things that can be done better. And I'm not saying that it's wrong for you to sign with a record label. I'm not saying that it's wrong for you to avoid them. I'm not saying that they're all dishonest. I'm just saying that they are looking out for their interests. It is a profit-driven business, and you need to understand that. Anytime somebody puts a piece of paper in front of you that's a contract, you need to understand what you're signing, especially if it's in a creative aspect where you're creating a product, okay, that is going to be put on the market for public consumption. You need to understand, how are you going to retain your rights? How are you going to get continuous residual payments? Whether it be a license agreement, whether it be, however it's going to be distributed, how are you going to be compensated? Are you cool with one-time compensation? Are you a type of person that wants royalties? My thing is, when you hear about the band issues with Destiny's Child, you also had the same thing with Dixie Chicks. You had the same thing with New Edition. You had Prince wanting to own the masters to his music. You also had Michael Jackson, who felt like his music wasn't being promoted the way it should have been. I think it was the Invincible album. You know, LL Cool J had the same thing with Def Jam, where he felt like, you know, his music wasn't being promoted. You need to have a good concept and understanding of how this industry works. You need to understand that when they give you money, you know, this money is not just for you to go live the life you want and just get a big entourage and, you know, recoup all the things in life you felt like the luxuries you never felt you deserved, you never got, but you feel you deserved. You know, you need to be mindful of that stuff. You need to be mindful of these contracts, and you need to make sure that when you sign a contract, be it with a major record label or independent label, you need to be mindful of what it is you're signing away, what it is you're getting. Every time you hit that tour, you know, you need to understand it's like what money is coming in, what money is going out. Who do you have to pay? That is the key thing you need to understand, is how are you distributing your money? Because even though the record label may give you an advance on this and that, and you got money coming in, you can make $5 million, but you got to pay taxes on that $5 million. Then you got your crew that needs to be paid. You got your engineers that need to be paid. You got your manager that needs to be paid. You know, so you still have a lot of money going out. So you need to be mindful of those type of things and be mindful of how you keep track of what you have created and how that creative work is going to bring more profit back into your life and not going back out into somebody else. Like I said, if they're getting 85 and you're getting 15%, you need to be mindful about that. You need to think about what you're doing when you sign these contracts. Do your research. I cannot say it enough. Do your research. Go online. Look up terms. There are hundreds of videos on YouTube. You even got artists like Future has a great video where he's doing an interview. It's on YouTube where he's talking about the music industry. You got so many resources at your hands to learn how to manage this and how to walk in there with a working knowledge of how to better walk out with a contract that's going to be suitable for you today and down the line. Be conscious about that. If you're in the music industry, I wish you the best of luck. Don't give up. Be smart and be mindful about your business. Hey, this is Reggie Maddox, man. Thank you for tuning in to the Simply Straight Talk Show. I hope you join us again. All right, next Friday when we come back with another show.
Thanks for listening to the Simply Straight Talk Show with Reggie Maddox. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our podcast to your friends and colleagues. And please leave us a positive review on iTunes. Be sure to check out our archive section on iTunes, Spotify, Libsyn, and YouTube. Join us next time for another edition of the Simply Straight Talk Show.